Hi, so today we are going to talk about the 4 drug types, the 4 categories that you can put drugs into. So most drugs will fit into one or more of the following categories, and sometimes a drug can fit into 2 categories, kind of depending on what it does to the body. So the 4 drug categories are narcotics, hallucinogens, depressants, and stimulants. And we're going to talk about kind of what characteristics each one of the categories has, and then some examples of types of drugs that are in it. By no means will our list be exhaustive, but at least it'll give you some idea of what the categories are and why they're like that. So the first category is narcotics. Narcotics induce a state of lethargy or sluggishness. That's what they cause in the body. Most narcotics are analgesics, which means they relieve pain, and they come from the poppy plant. So most of the time when you're talking about narcotics, you're talking about some type of pain reliever. And then the adverse effect usually is lethargy or sluggishness. That's what it causes. So here are some examples of narcotics: morphine, methadone, heroin, codeine, Oxycontin. And again, by no means is that a completely exhaustive list. It's just some examples to give you an idea of what we're talking about here in terms of narcotics. So these are going to be your pain relievers, and almost all of them stem from the poppy plant. Your second grouping of drugs, your second drug type, are hallucinogens. Hallucinogens are drugs that cause marked alterations in normal thought process, perceptions, and moods. So these are going to be the ones where individuals on the drugs are having alterations in their regular thoughts. So they're seeing things, or they imagine that they're somewhere else, or they see somebody who's not really there, that type of thing. And hallucinogens, here's some examples. Marijuana falls under hallucinogen, LSD, PCP, acid, MDMA, which is ecstasy. These are all examples of things that that fall into this category because of how they affect the brain. They cause alterations in your normal thought process. Sometimes it's mood alterations, sometimes it's perceptions of what you think is reality, sometimes it's just general thought processes don't work the same. The third category for drug types is depressants. Depressants are any type of drug that slows down the central nervous system. So its focus is to actually physically take your central nervous system and slow it down. Those neurons from firing at regular speed into a much slower speed. Alcohol is probably the biggest depressant that's out there. Barbiturates, inhalants, benzodiazepines, and GHB, which is like the date rape drug. Right? Those are all examples of depressants. It's the job of a depressant when you take it in is to slow down your central nervous system. People have, slow reaction times, slow thinking times, etc., etc. And then your fourth category that we're going to take a look at are stimulants. And stimulants do the opposite of depressants. Stimulants speed up your central nervous system. So they get it moving at a faster speed than what should be normal. Here's some examples of stimulants: cocaine, crack, crystal meth, amphetamines. And all of those drugs, when people are on them, they've got high energy, they're shaky, jittery. They can't necessarily always keep a consistent thought because their mind is just rapidly firing. So the central nervous system is sped up to, depending on the type of drug, a very high speed. It usually gives people lots of energy until the drug wears off, right? Until it stops. So those are the 4 categories of drugs, or the 4 types: narcotics, hallucinogens, depressants, and stimulants. And I gave you some examples in each category, and we'll do some work with them, being able to recognize which category drugs fall under. And then we're also going to talk about the schedules. And the schedule of drug will depend on kind of how it affects the body, its medical uses, how much abuse it has, etc., etc. So the next thing that we'll talk about are the different schedules of drugs, and then we'll kind of take a look at that as a whole, and we'll start to take a look at penalties for having certain drugs.